History of the Bay, the LA versus San Francisco graffiti beef. I've talked a little bit about this on TikTok, but I think it's a good idea to go in and put a little more details out there. Now, before I get started, I want to just put it out there that I'm trying to be mindful of the history. I'm trying to tell it as accurately as I can. And I don't want to bring up any old beefs or make it look like, people still have funk. And I don't want to use anybody's name or any crew names in a way that they don't appreciate. So I'm not going to tell the full entire story, even though there's a lot of stuff that went in. But, it's still a big part of the history of graffiti, not just in the Bay Area, not just in California, but, for the whole culture overall. This is really important stuff. So let me just say that, yeah, I'm going to give kind of a censored version, but you'll still be able to get some of the story. Even though San Francisco and LA are both in California, there's some pretty big differences between the cities overall, and there's some big differences between the graffiti. There's a little bit of a general rivalry between the Bay and LA. I mean, you could look at the Giants and the Dodgers, but overall, man, we get along. We got love for each other, and at least speaking for myself, there's no problem with LA. We love LA. A lot of people in LA love the Bay and they love Frisco. But like I said, when it comes down to the graffiti, there's a lot of difference. In LA, one of the main things that's different is that it's a really spread out city. If you want to get up as a graffiti writer in LA, you got to work pretty damn hard to get noticed. There's so many different cities within LA County. So one of the main ways to get up that they use is the freeways. And when you're hitting up on the freeway and, it could be traffic, but more than likely somebody's just going to drive by really fast, you got to go big. Another big difference is the gang culture in LA. We got gangsters in the Bay, of course. We got turfs, we got hoods. But as some of y'all probably know, it's a different level in LA, just of how entrenched some of these places are with the gang culture, how active they are, and how many gang members are out there. It affects a lot of areas of life, not just graffiti. So when you're a graffiti writer in LA too, you got to be ready to deal with that. You might be out bombing and some cats might come around and hit you up, and you can't really be a punk about it if you want to do what you got to do. So I feel like a lot of writers from LA, they just carry that mentality of like, man, I got to get down for mine. If I'm going to do my graffiti, I'm not going to let anybody mess with me. Now, San Francisco, on the other hand, is a really small city. It's only 7 by 7. It's 49 square miles. You can get around the entire city by bus, on a bicycle, even on foot. So it's pretty easy to get up in San Francisco. We have our history of graffiti culture, the letters going back to the 80s, the early 80s. There's a really strong New York influence. New York has the subway system, we got the bus system, and a lot of the early writers, they adopted that style in what they call funk. And that's basically your traditional graffiti style, your traditional colors, the arrows, the fly characters, the b-boy poses, that type of thing. Now we have gangsters and we got cholos up here too, but San Francisco's a pretty welcoming environment. It's been shaped by a lot of people from other parts of the country, other parts of the world. A lot of people have come to San Francisco from other places and found a home because they identify with the culture that was out here. They love the neighborhoods. They love the vibe out here. So there's always been a lot of visitors coming to San Francisco, and the graffiti scene is no different. And I spoke a little bit earlier about the New York influence on San Francisco graffiti, and a lot of New York writers have lived in San Francisco, like KR and many others. People kind of take graffiti vacations where they come to San Francisco. Like I said, it's an easy place to get up. There's a lot of dope writers here already. There's a whole scene. So it's kind of a good way to get away from wherever you might be from, the East Coast or wherever, and come through. And like I said, we've embraced that. And I think the San Francisco graffiti has benefited from that, having all these different people come through, seeing all these different styles. And so for the most part, it's been all love. There was a time in the 90s when there was a pretty large migration of LA writers. There's just no denying it. They had a huge influence on the city. And one of the main crews that came out here was MSK, AWR. Those are two crews that started in LA. They continue to run LA. They've been doing it big, and they came up to San Francisco kind of on what I described. Like, LA is getting hot. LA is getting the same old, same old. Let's try something new. Let's try something different. Let's just mob up to Frisco. It's pretty close to LA. It's not that far. And a lot of these guys were up here and they were active for a long time. You also had crews like LTS and a lot of other cats from LA have splashed through. CBS, a lot of different cats from LA have splashed through. But like I said, MSK and AWR, when they came here in the 90s, they left an unmistakable mark on San Francisco. They started hitting up the city in ways that we hadn't seen before. The style was different. Like I said, we have this funk style. The MSK AWR style was totally different. It was really advanced. It was new. There was something grimy about it, something gothic about it. The letters were intricate. They brought that LA mentality of going big. So they would do full color pieces with backgrounds and everything on really hard to reach spots, places that nobody ever thought about hitting before, really like obscure rooftop spots and hot spots where you wouldn't even expect to be able to pull some of that stuff off. And they really got up. Growing up in San Francisco, I saw MSK AWR everywhere. I wouldn't have even known they were from LA because they were just all over Frisco, and it was definitely inspiring and it was definitely influential and it was dope. But like I said, at the same time, San Francisco graffiti culture goes deep. Starting in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, one of the standout crews, if not the most standout crew in San Francisco, was ICP. Now, ICP is known for doing burners, doing characters, hitting a lot of ill spots, getting up, hitting the buses, a lot of diverse people in that crew. As MSK and AWR is coming up here and really getting up in ways that nobody else had, of course, people started to really take notice. So like I said, I'm not going to go into full detail about what happened. It's not my story to tell personally. Other cats have spoken on it in other areas. I've heard things offline. The story's been told to me. I'm not going to repeat everything that I've heard. But eventually, it was kind of only a matter of time before these two different styles, these different crews kind of came head to head. The LA Riders had like a gang mentality towards their graffiti. They weren't going to take any crap from anybody. They weren't going to let people think they were soft. They weren't going to let people go over their graffiti. They weren't going to let people chase them off of spots. And at the same time, they started stepping on toes a little bit to where the attitude kind of seemed like this is our city now. We're the kings. We're up. Nobody else is up more than us right now. We run Frisco and we ain't even from Frisco. And there was problems that kind of started to pop off with San Francisco riders and tensions and conflicts that happened. These guys from LA, they were very serious about their graffiti. They were serious about their spots. They were serious about their names for the individual riders and for the crew. If you had something similar to one of their names, they were going to come see you about it. Even if you were from Frisco and they're in your city, they're still going to be like, nah, you ain't writing that, or you ain't hitting this spot, or you ain't doing this, or you ain't doing that. And after a while, that kind of started to get around a little bit. And the San Francisco riders, they weren't really feeling that. So like I said, the main cats at the time in San Francisco, at least in my opinion and many others, was ICP. There were a lot of other riders involved. There were a lot of other crews involved. But basically, the word kind of spread that these boys from LA were kind of kicking up some dust. And riders from San Francisco, riders from the Bay decided to come together. Because even though, like I said, we were welcoming up here, we've benefited from different people coming in and painting and getting up and showing different styles. And for the most part, everybody appreciated the LA Cats' graffiti, and they appreciated their styles, and they appreciated how hard they got up. They didn't want it to just be like it's free lunch in Frisco. These riders up here ain't gonna do nothing. You can just come up in here from wherever and take the whole city over and disrespect people and all that type of thing. So they decided, you know what, we're coming together, and a battle officially popped off. Usually a graffiti battle, it can go a few different ways. One is just a straight up battle of styles, or you can say, I'm better than you. Whatever you're doing, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna burn it. You're doing this, I'm gonna come with that. I'm gonna come way harder than you. I'm gonna come bigger than you. I'm gonna come with more flavor and more style. You can also have the battle with getting up. I'm gonna hit more spots than you. You can't hit more spots than me. You know what I'm saying? Whoever goes hardest is the winner. And then you got a straight up back and forth type battle where I'm crossing you out, you're crossing me out, I'm going over you, you're going over me. And in this case between LA and San Francisco, it was pretty much all of the above. I feel like MSK went all out, ICP went all out. There were a few different spots in particular, like this fence above the 101 freeway that got one crew would get up on it, then another crew would go over them, then the other crew would go over them, and back and forth until eventually someone held the spot down. Outside of the art form, it definitely got physical between people, and it was a back and forth type thing where, man, if we see them, we on their helmet. If they see the other side, it's the same thing. And there were some squabbles and there were some definite conflicts that got worked out. And it was a pretty big conflict for a while between all these different writers. The thing about a battle is it can only go back and forth for so long. There's only so much you can take somebody going over your graffiti. There's only so much energy you can put into going over somebody else's graffiti. And when both sides are holding their own, they're not backing down from the battle. They're not backing down from any fights. Eventually, it's just got to get squashed. And that's pretty much what happened. Word got out to both sides that they were ready to come together. Certain grievances got aired out and settled. Certain people got their squabble on, got their fights in, got their one-on-ones in, etc. And eventually it was kind of established that the San Francisco cats had to be respected. They were going to hold it down for the city. You can't just come up here from wherever and start bossing up and just taking over and run us out of our own city. That's not going to happen. All right, cool. At the same time, the cats from LA, they had to be respected as well. Like I said, they got up. Their style was undeniable. They were raw and they were putting it down. So it kind of had to be a point where there was a mutual agreement where it was like, yeah, cool, come up here and do your thing, as long as you're not stepping on anybody's toes, you're not disrespecting certain people, and pretty much there's room for us all to get along. Even though the battle squashed, it's not like everybody became best friends, but there was that mutual respect. The cats from LA like MSK and AWR held it down in the city, but those guys have gone worldwide. They've moved on to other locations. Has to be respected. Like I said, they go hard for graffiti all over the country, all over the world, and still hold it down for LA. Cats from Frisco like ICP are still out here, still doing their thing. Overall, this is a really interesting piece of graffiti history, graffiti culture, and I think it deserves to be talked about. And people on all sides deserve respect. There's no beef between LA and Frisco. We got love for LA. LA got love for us. Anybody saying anything different is just an idiot. We don't promote that type of stuff, man. But again, this kind of had to happen. These two worlds came together, and overall, it's a dope part of the history of the Bay.